All right, this is David here with GamingTrend.com. I managed to find JMac walking around, and I ambushed him and got him to agree to speak to me. I just wanted to talk to you about, what's it like just to be a caster? I mean, it's going to be weird 20 years ago if you told somebody, like, what for a living I talk about video games, they wouldn't believe you. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, casting is an unreal experience. It's something that, whenever I go into telling people who are unfamiliar with esports in general or just kind of like on the unknown about video games and how competitive they are in this degree, I like to say I'm like the Tony Romo of video games. I'm sitting there and I just get to talk about it while everything else is going on. So being able to come from a background like I was, I was in... I'm not going to say I was raised poorly, but, I was in, middle-class house, didn't really get to do a whole lot of things. My first console was an N64 with Donkey Kong as my first game through. So video games have been a part of my life for such a long time. And I found Smite just in my very first year of college, whenever I was playing all the way back in 2012, 2013. So I found the game, fell in love with it right away, and just kept playing it and playing it. Eventually got to join onto the stream team. And one day I sat down, I was like, man, I love what the esports guys are doing. Being able to cast that, that sounds like it's really cool. Coming from a little bit of content creator stuff on YouTube before that, I was like, surely casting is just one step up from there. Boy, was I wrong. It is an entire journey, going into casting. It's not something that I was able to just jump right into and be good. It's something I've been working at for the last 6 or so years, and something that I've had to do a lot of work with as well. So being able to just do this, coming from playing the game and being a fan and watching and wanting to be there, to now other people are asking what's it feel like to be like at the world stage and whatnot. It's unreal, in all honesty. Like, there's no feeling like being able to cast it and be in like a dream job scenario, but being in front of a world stage like this is a completely different experience.
So you're the casters in general are kind of the public face of the Smite esports type thing. Do you ever get stopped or recognized when you're out just grocery shopping or anything like that happen?
So I haven't actually been stopped out in public before. Smite's on kind of like the smaller scale compared to things like some of the other big esports titles out there, through Overwatch, Call of Duty, League of Legends, all those kinds of things. Smite's on a little bit of a smaller scale compared to that. And I'd say I'm even personally on like a smaller scale compared to some of the other casters and members of the team. I'm sure that like Hindu or Dave or Miff or one of those guys have probably gotten some recognition out there, but so far hasn't happened to me in public. It's mostly just been here within the venue. I've had people stop me and whatnot, so haven't gotten the public experience yet, but maybe one day.
That sounds fun. So I'm just curious, just being a caster, just in a broad generic thing across any of the games, you got to be able to be comfortable speaking publicly in front of a camera. There's certain skills there. But the part that wonders to me is like there's certain things that are just super niche and lots of knowledge you have to have. I mean, there's more than 110 gods right now.
Oh, yeah.
Smite. I wouldn't even hazard a guess at how many items there are. You guys know the names of abilities. Like I'm impressed just watching from home, and you're like, oh yeah, so and so used Fields of Love from Cupid, and it's like, how do you memorize the names of all these abilities? I mean, I know sometimes you can take the shortcuts of that's his 4, that's his 3, but I mean, is there a boot camp you go through? Like, what is that like? Or is it just, hey, just play the game for 10,000 hours and eventually you just pick this stuff up? Or
So a benefit that I've gotten to have with being able to build up my Smite knowledge is I've been playing since 2013 just about. So I've had now almost 10 years that I've gotten to gradually build in the game. I mean, I was playing the game when like Chalk was first joining in. That was my first like new god experience was Chalk joining the game. And that was back when there was maybe like 30, 40 gods in the game at that time. They were also releasing like 10 to 12 gods a year at that point compared to now where it's only like 5 or 6. So it's slowed down in that regard, so I don't have to learn as many new gods. Yes, I think it's 123, maybe 124 now with Surtur just being released as well with the upcoming season. All the items it's a mountain of information. There is a lot of studying when you go from Worlds till like first phase of the new season or like first tournaments of the new season. It is a lot of just sit down, play the game, learn everything. You got like 4 to 6 weeks to kind of start hammering that in. Obviously, we don't memorize every single, like, this gives X amount of HP and X amount of prots. As long as we kind of just know the general basics of it, it's really what helps us go through. As far as ability names go, I'll be honest, I stopped like not like trying to learn all the ability names, because some of them get absolutely ridiculous to learn, but like getting the basic line of it. You know, I can call, you know, things by a shorthand like a stun. Ultimates are kind of the big ones that I try and lock down for them, as long as they're easy to say during a broadcast. And that's kind of one of the things that I always, you know, kind of tell amateur casters and people coming up in is you don't need to know every ability name, because trying to say some of them is a mouthful in the middle of a broadcast. So just knowing jumps, stuns, you know, dashes, whatnot, you know, if you call them just by that, that's good. Knowing the ability names does help if you need to get to like a more analytical talk with it, and, you know, maybe to appease the crowd of, hey, this guy knows a lot. But in all honesty, you don't need to know every single detail of the game. As long as you know the broad general of it, I'd say like the 90%, that'll usually get you pretty far.
Is there a special skill set or technique that you've learned to just watch mass chaos in a team fight? And I mean, there's just so much information that's going on. There's, you know, 4 ults getting cast simultaneously. Like, as a caster, are you kind of just picking out like, hey, I'm going to notice this guy and just follow that person around and figure out what's going on around them? Or are you somehow miraculously able to just soak all of this in? What is that like? So
when it comes to casting like team fights and things like that, it's a good balance between your actual play-by-play announcer and your analyst right next to you. They're typically looking for a lot of the smaller details in and around the fight, where your play-by-play is looking for that little thread to follow throughout the entire fight. You're looking for one player. So if I'm seeing something like a Naja, I know I'm only going to have a moment to keep track of that Naja, because once Sash ult in, they're off the field, and now I have to move on to a new thread there. So it's kind of juggling and knowing when to know which one to stick with is kind of the important thing with more than anything else. So having that balance between you and your co-caster to know, like, I'm going to hit the big stuff because I know you're going to hit the smaller things. I know that you're watching to see, you know, where the jungler was that entire time of the fight, you know, what the carry was doing, standing so far back and whatnot. So having that balance is important for anybody aspiring to do play-by-play. It's really just watching a lot of team fights and kind of understanding what's the more important portion through. And also another one is, you know, the idea of chasing kills. As a commentator, you don't always want to hold on to the kill chase, the guy living at 5 HP. You can sometimes just say, okay, cool, he's at 5 HP. He should go down, no problem. And then you move on to the next portion. But if he still lives, then you have a fun opportunity to come back and go, wait, no, this guy's still alive? Like, what's happening over here? How is this guy still going? Your secondary will sometimes latch onto them to make sure that they go down for you until you see the kill actually pop up. So it's a lot of balancing between you and a co-caster, but it can get a little chaotic. It's all just about kind of finding your center more than anything within the fight.
Do you guys have to go to school to learn how to like speak in a very excited manner, or is that? I mean, there's I don't know how to describe it. There's just like casters in general, regardless of the sport, tend to just have a way to just convey excitement as they're speaking the words of like what's going on. And
right,
is that a difficult thing to learn, or is it something you just pick up over time, or?
Yeah, so for learning how to kind of like speak through these games and whatnot, a lot of it, you can go to school. I know that I believe Agro actually taught a course on esports commentary at one point just recently this past year, where he went over like a lot of like the basics of it, as well as kind of like some of the smaller intricacies. Me personally, I went to school to be a graphic designer, and I realized 3.5 years in that it wasn't for me. Too late at that point, just got to finish the degree out. Jumped into doing electrical like for 5 years, so I don't really come from a speaking background as far as profession goes, but I did a little bit of content creation on YouTube with some friends who ran it was like a Pokemon Let's Play channel that we were running at one point that is no longer there. It has now ceased to exist, but learning how to speak is really just something that you just have to keep doing. When I was making car drives from home to university, it was a 9-hour drive, and you can only fill it with so much music or so many, you know, podcasts and whatnot. But listening to how others talk is a very important thing. Also kind of learning your own rhythm, your own cadence is important. It's all about just practicing it. That's the best way to get better at speaking. You got to speak. To get better at reading, you got to keep reading it. It's kind of one of those things that the only way to improve at it is just to keep working at it. So if you want to practice speaking in front of people, I know it sounds cliche, but standing in front of the mirror, or even just like turning on your webcam and opening up, you know, some kind of, you don't have to open like a stream or anything like that. But if you open up like OBS or any of your like recording softwares, just open it up, put on the webcam. And if you even need to, just throw a script in front of you if you don't know what to say or if you don't have a script. Just think of anything. Just think of a random topic. Say, oh man, I went to the store today and they didn't have enough Doritos on the shelf or anything like that, or there wasn't enough of this there, and I can't believe it. I've been going here for 3 weeks, and every single time I come by, there's just been something missing. And just find any kind of random topic that you can to just go on a rant for a minute or so. Because whenever it comes to commentary, especially in a game like Smite where anything can happen at a moment's notice, there are moments where you'll have to speak for 30, 40 seconds, maybe even upwards to a minute because nothing's going on. Sometimes you'll need to be able to get out in 5 to 10 seconds because all of a sudden the action is kicking up. And kind of knowing those inflection points, where to ramp up, really just comes down to a lot of practice. It comes down to watching a lot of the game and kind of knowing and understanding when somebody's actually in danger. One of my big faults, at the very beginning was every single fight that happened, I'm like, I got to get up there. I got to get ramped up. I got to get ready for this. I've then come to a pass where certain aspects of it are more important, like First Blood, very big in a MOBA style setting because First Blood really is usually a momentum shift or kind of a change of tides and whatnot. And then obviously dances around big objectives are also like the biggest points. And then as well as that, it's also the fights around Phoenixes and in towards the Titan defense. So those kind of like 3 to 4 areas are like the most important for a game like Smite, where it's objective, First Blood, maybe a huge team fight, and then big defenses at the base. Those are kind of the big ones. So that's knowing when you kind of ramp yourself in there. You also have to understand cadence and flow control and whatnot. So if I'm just keeping going like this, all of a sudden everybody who's listening is going to get really anxious because I'm getting really, really fast and keep ramping and ramping up. Whenever you get to sieges, it's one thing that I've learned a lot of is getting ready. Team is stepping up. We're probably not expecting anything for like another 10 to 15 seconds. And it gives me a lot of breath control, so that way when the fight does break out, I'm not already out of breath, I'm not already winded by the time we get to that. And that was a huge learning curve for me, going from the amateur stuff into the professional scene here, was learning a lot of cadence and flow control. That was really the biggest thing that was hit for me for all of Season 9, was learning how to control that, learning how to really slow things down if I need to. Because man, when I look back at some of my first casts, I was going a mile a minute every single time that mic was on me. I was just zooming through because I thought, oh, Joe, you gotta be the fast guy, you gotta be the loud guy. But there's a lot of intricacies with it.
Would you say your time as a caster and just watching all of these pro players playing and figuring out how to analyze things and spot trends and threads, would you say that's made you a better Smite player?
I'm just a Smite player, man. For me, whenever it comes down to playing the actual game, I jump in there. It's always a learning thing for me. I'm not trying to be the one to slam to grandmasters and max out my MMR or anything like that. When I load in, I'm either there just trying to learn or just trying to have some fun. But watching a lot of the pro scene stuff, and for the fans at home who are trying to get into maybe the SOC or the SCC and one day into the SPL as well, trying to get into these big leagues, watching how the pros play, kind of understanding what they're doing, but not only what they're doing, why they're doing it is the secondary important. Because you'll pop up and you'll see like Haddock's running Horus solo, and you'll go, oh, I can play Horus solo, I like that god, that's fun. But you don't always understand the why he's playing. What is the reason for picking this over something a little bit more conventional? So it kind of gives you an idea as to why they do what they're doing, as opposed to just they're going out there doing it. That's why we always sometimes make a joke on a broadcast like, oh, my ranked queues are going to be ruined for the next like 3 weeks because Yarkor played Bologna ADC in a matchup. But understanding why the pros do that, it does make you a better player. It's made me a little bit better as well. Maybe not mechanically better, but it definitely has helped me as far as like map awareness and understanding things like that.
Cool. I know, so as a public face, there's glitz and glamour and everyone sees you guys and it's like, oh, hey, all this is really cool. What are some of the non-glamorous aspects? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a job. There's things in any job. There's just like, yeah, this is stuff I'm not really fond of, but that enables me to do the stuff that I really do enjoy. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, some of the not so fun stuff, obviously having to just sit down, like when a new big patch comes out, like a mid-season or an entire new season, having to sit down, read through 38 pages of patch notes to figure out everything that's going on, all the new changes happening. It's not always the most fun thing trying to remember that, so trying to shorthand a lot of those things is important. Like, I don't need to know that, like, Kukulkan dropped 10 base damage on every rank of this, and also his leap had an increased cooldown by X amount of seconds, and his ultimate now only does this. As long as you kind of like learn the baseline, it's really helped through a lot of that. especially for someone like who's a chair 1 caster. Like, we don't need to know the damage numbers on everything, or how long a stun, or how far a leap, or anything like that goes. So having to learn all of that stuff is definitely one of the harder points there. As well as just sometimes we'll randomly get pulled by the boss like, hey, we need to record a content piece, and you're going to have to be the one to do it, even if like it's not something that you're used to. Me personally, I do the weekly recap for the Smite Pro League. So at the very end of every single week, we have our 6 or 7 matches of Smite that get played from the Pro League. At least this last year is about what we were averaging every week, was like 7 sets every single week. And right when set 3 is done, I've got my laptop set up, ready to go on the studio next to on a separate part of the soundstage. And I'm recording the recap immediately. So sometimes those longer days, having to go home 30 minutes or later compared to everybody else, can sometimes suck. Probably the biggest gripe that all of us have is just how our weeks go, because our week starts on Wednesday. Oh. We go Wednesday to Sunday. So we don't really have a true weekend like everybody else. That's probably like the biggest pain point there. But after you've been doing it for, for myself doing it for a year and a half, you kind of get used to that Monday, Tuesday being your day to go out and do your shopping and take care of things around, the house, the apartment, or whatnot. So sometimes it's just, the random content piece. Sometimes it's the fact that you get a Monday, Tuesday off compared to a Saturday, Sunday, so you don't get to go out to a lot of the big events and things like that. But all in all, can't really complain too much about the job.
Yeah, I imagine from a social aspect of, hey, all my friends are off of work and we want to go hang out on a Saturday. I was like, sorry guys, I'm busy. Mm-hmm. But on the pro side of that, you don't necessarily have to take off work if you've got like, hey, I got to change the oil in my car and the businesses aren't open on the weekend, so I got to take off in the middle. So yeah. It's like Monday and Tuesday, everything's still open.
Oh, for sure.
Well, cool. Hey, I appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me. Thank you for agreeing to do that. I hope you have a great time at Worlds. It's been fantastic being here, so I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.